Good morning, everyone. My name is Martha Wilson. I'm the Chair of Parental Involvement, and welcome to the Special Education Parent Advisory Monthly Meeting for the month of November. Today, we will have our welcome from Ms. Haliandro, our FOC.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a little under the weather. Good morning, good morning. My name is Rebecca Arriaga. I'm the Family Operations Coordinator here at Davis. On behalf of Ms. Sharon Woodridge, our principal, we want to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. So our meeting today is going to be based on special education. As we said last month, we have consolidated all three of the meetings, the DPAC, special needs, and the bilingual. Today, we're focusing on special needs. I'm going to invite up Mr. Kevin Barfield, who is the president of Special Needs, and he will take the agenda from here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Good morning, everyone. This is a new way of us trying to host meetings, to consolidate, to cut down the time that the FOCs and parents are coming out to our district level meetings. So right now I want to introduce our bilingual president, Ms. Sharma. Would you come up and introduce yourself? And
Mr. Bradfield is going to do the English part. I'm going to do the Spanish part. Buenos días a todos los padres bilingües que tenemos aquí presentes. Yo soy la presidenta del Concilio de Padres Bilingües del Distrito. Estamos haciendo las reuniones ahora juntos y después vamos a repartirnos en separados grupos para diseminar la información para ustedes. Gracias.
so again, what we want to do and what we're trying to do is our district level meetings. This is the district level District Parent Advisory Council, special needs and bilingual. And usually what we try to do is we want to have parent leaders come to the meetings besides parents. That way also they can take the information back and turnkey it within their schools. So today, again, we're dealing with, last month it was dealing with Title I. This month we're dealing with special needs and the parents' right to know. So again, when parents are requesting or need services, it's a process. So we have a district staff member here today that's going to go over the process of what parents, the steps the parents can take to actually get their children the service that they need. So we're going to bring up Miss Christy Patterson-Mouse from our special education department, and she's going to do the presentation to the parents and staff.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm going to pass out take a minute to just pass out a handout for everybody. So, oh, great. Oh, let me just keep one. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Kristen Moss, and I am with the Office of Special Services. My title here in District is Supervisor of Special Education Compliance and Data, and my role is that I oversee the Child Study Team in all schools in District. So all Child Study Team members fall under me. The Child Study Team members include the school psychologist, the school social worker, the school learning consultant, the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, and the physical therapist. All of those people are members of the Child Study Team, and if you have a child who has special needs, or if you have a child who may have special needs, you may have come into contact with some of those people. So today I wanted to talk to everyone about the special education process and the steps that you go through if you feel like your child needs special services. Sometimes it can seem confusing, but I have a handout to try to make a little bit more sense for everyone. I believe that I do have a copy of this handout in Spanish. If you would like one in Spanish, you can let me know, and I can make sure that I can get that to you. I didn't have it handy. Yes.
Okay, the Spanish copy, you can hand it to me, and then when I do my section, I can hand it to the parents.
I will have to email it to you. I don't have it. I know that Our lead educator, who is our bilingual staff member, did translate it. I didn't get it back yet. So I just need to get a copy of it, and then ultimately it will be English on one side and Spanish on the other. Well, this I made. So this kind of breaks down some things that you may have encountered in the past are two things. One is the special education code. Can I borrow this for just a minute? Oops. So the two books that we use in special education are the special education code that looks like this. This is the law that New Jersey has written out that explains every part of special education and what we have to do and how we have to complete our processes. There are a lot of words, and a lot of it is really long sentences that say refer back to this other section, do it the way we did this other thing, and it can be very difficult to look through. Because of that, New Jersey created a resource called Parental Rights in Special Education that is like this, and this book is basically written in a way that anybody can understand it. The law is very difficult and time-consuming to read. The Parental Rights in Special Education is much easier to read and understand. Some of you may have multiple copies of this. The Child Study Team will try to give it to you every time they see you. You can take it or you can decline it if you already have some. It is really, really interesting if you want to read through it. Again, if you don't have a copy and you want one, I can get you that. We have lots of them at the Board of Education. It basically has lists of questions that parents might have, and then it tells you the answer to those questions. In the back, it has resources for if you are not happy with the way things are going, who can you contact? I can tell you essentially the chain of command would be if you meet with a member of the Child Study Team and you are not happy with that meeting, you would contact me. If you are not happy with what happens in the conversation with me, you would contact my supervisor, who is Jill Trainer. If you're not happy with the response you get from Jill Trainer, you can file for mediation with the state, and the state will send a mediator to talk to both the district and the parent at the same time to try to resolve the conflict. And if you can't make a resolution that way, you can file for due process, which basically means that you're suing the district to try to get the services that you feel your child needs. We do try really hard to avoid going to due process or mediation if we can. We want to resolve things here in district first. But if you feel strongly that your child needs something that he's not getting, that's always your right to follow the steps in this book. So for now, I'm going to talk about just the process if you feel like your child might possibly need special services. So the first step is that you identify that your child may need extra help. So that's at the top, step one. If you think that your child needs extra help, the next step is to communicate to the child's teacher. So you'll talk to his teacher, you'll ask, hey, how's my child doing in your class? Are you having any concerns? Here are my concerns. It's entirely possible that the teacher might say to you, your child's doing fine. He's doing the same as all the other kids in the class. A lot of times this might happen if you have more than one child, and an older child maybe was pretty advanced and a younger child is more on age level. I know that happened to me. When my son was going through school, everything was easy. He was always ahead. It was very simple for him in school. When my daughter came up to those same grades, I felt like she was really struggling, that she must be so far behind. She was really having difficulty, but every time I talked to her teachers, they were like, she's okay. She's doing the same as everybody else. And it was just because I was because I had that experience with my older child with everything being easy, that I expected the same for both kids, and that did not happen. Ultimately, the teachers were right. She turned out perfectly fine. She's a senior in high school now, and we're applying to colleges. So they were right. I was a little bit worried, but I did talk to them. I took their information into account, and ultimately they were right. So if you talk to your child's teacher, and the child's teacher says, yeah, your child, I have some concerns. There are areas where he's struggling, and it seems like he's having more difficulty than the other kids. Then the teacher will provide interventions to your child. So what interventions are is she tries something specific to help him, not moving him to the front of the room, not calling mom. It's a specific educational thing that she does to try to help him. So if your child struggles with spelling, her intervention may be that she provides an extra 10 minutes of individual spelling instruction at the end of the day 3 times a week. So 3 times a week, she pulls him aside for 10 minutes. They go over the spelling words. She really tries to help him learn those spelling words before the test, and to see if that will help. For some kids, that's all they need. They just needed that little extra bit of help in the classroom, and they catch up, or they do well. Sometimes the intervention might be, some of the schools have after-school programs where you can send your child, and there's someone that will help with homework and will help explain things in their work that they might be confused with. So that could be an intervention. But if the teacher does educational interventions and your child isn't able to catch up or isn't able to make a lot of improvement, then the child can make not the child, because, they're children, the teacher or the parent can make a request to the child study team to have a meeting. So the request is in writing. If it comes from the teacher, it is usually part of an I&RS packet. I&RS stands for Intervention and Referral Services. That's a team at the school that helps the teacher with this middle part, with the interventions. They help her think of interventions to do with your child. They help make sure she's really doing them. They help with looking at the data to see if there was an improvement. So if there wasn't an improvement, they can make a request for the child study team, or the parent can make a request. The parent can write a letter that says, I would like to meet with the child study team. That's literally all it has to say. So once the request is made by the parent or by the Intervention and Referral Services team, the child study team has 20 days to meet with the parent. So once that letter is in their hand, within 20 days, they have to meet with you. This does include weekends, but it doesn't include holidays. So if you give it to the team the day before Christmas break doesn't count in the 20 days. So once they meet with you, that's called an evaluation planning meeting. And the point of this meeting is to talk about your child, to talk to the teacher, to talk to the parent, to talk to anybody in the school that would have information about how that child is doing, and determine if the child may have a disability, and if he might have a disability, whether he needs to be tested, and if he needs to be tested, which tests need to be done. So the tests that might be done are a psychological. The psychological looks at your child's IQ, which is basically his ability to learn. He might have a learning evaluation, which is done by the learning consultant. The learning evaluation looks at what has he learned so far. He might have a social history. The social history is done with the social worker and the parent, or the social worker and the teacher. It looks at his past, it looks at his developmental milestones, his relationships in school, And it takes all of that evidence together and talks about whether that child is adapting to school the same way other kids his age are adapting to school. You might have a speech evaluation that looks at your child's ability to understand and give back information verbally. If your child is Spanish speaking or mostly Spanish speaking, those evaluations will be done in Spanish. We have a speech therapist who is Spanish speaking who does those evaluations, and we have a psychologist who is Spanish speaking who can do the psychological and the learning evaluations. So you don't need to feel like, I feel like my child isn't going to do well because he doesn't speak English very well. We take that into account. At this meeting, we decide what type of evaluations and what language. If your child speaks a language other than English or Spanish, we have a lot of families whose kids speak Vietnamese. Then we have to contract with outside agencies to get evaluations done in his native language. That does take longer because it can be difficult to find those people, but it's your child's right to be tested in the language that he's most comfortable in. So at the planning meeting, if it is decided that your child should be tested, we have to get consent from you. It has to be written consent. It cannot be over the phone. It can't be that the teacher saw you at dismissal and asked if you would consent and you said sure, and so the teacher told the child study team. It has to be written consent from you. So there's a form that they have that you sign. If you go to this planning meeting and everybody says, you know what, we do think your child needs to be tested, and suddenly you're feeling a certain way and you're not sure that this is right for your child, you don't have to consent. You can just say no thank you, or you can say, I'd rather think about it for a little while, I'll get back to you. At any one of these steps, the parent has the right to say, never mind, stop. So a lot of parents don't realize that. Sure.
Can the parent get a second opinion from either a physician or another outside?
Well,
If they're not feeling happy about the evaluation the child study team did?
right. So at any point, the parent can utilize the resources in this handbook. So it comes in a few different layers. If you have your first meeting and the team says, we don't feel that your child should be tested, so we're not going to test, and you think, no, he needs to be tested, and you disagree with that decision, then that's when you would go up the chain of command and possibly end up with mediation from the state or with due process if that can't be resolved before that point. Once you give consent, then our team is going to test your child. If you give consent to test and two of the evaluations are finished and one of them is not, and you suddenly think, I changed my mind, I don't want this, you can tell the team at any time, never mind, I changed my mind. There's no point where the parent is forced to continue the process. You always have the right to end the process at any time. Usually that doesn't happen, but every now and then, sometimes it might. Once the evaluations are completed, you're going to get a copy of all the evaluations at least 10 days before the next meeting. So those evaluations have to be in your hand for 10 days before the meeting. This gives you a chance to read them. You can have your sister read it. You can have the child's teacher read it. You can read it. You can call me and say, hey, I got this evaluation. There's this part that I don't understand. I'm happy to talk to any parents through it. But you just have the chance to look over all of those evaluations ahead of time. And then you're going to have a meeting, an eligibility meeting, where the team will look at all of the information and they will determine if your child does have one of the 14 disabilities named in state law. So that's in this book, there are 14 disabilities that your child might have that would enable him to get special services. Yes.
And so to kind of piggyback off of what, off of her question, so if, for example, the school district deems that the child doesn't need special education services,
Yep.
but you get a second opinion, I guess that's what you were saying.
Yep, I'm
How much, oh.
getting to
you're
that
getting
part
to
right
that?
now.
Okay, because I.
So, let's say the evaluations are finished, you go to the meeting, whatever they say to you, you're like, nuh-uh. And you do not agree with it, or you're reading this evaluation and you're like, this is not my kid. Sometimes, you might read the evaluation and be like, this doesn't sound like him at all in any way, shape, or form. I don't believe that this is correct. At that point, you can ask for independent evaluations. So what that means is the process gets put on hold, and the school district will contract with an outside agency to do evaluations again. So this is a agency that's not affiliated with the school district. They don't care whether we put kids in special ed or not. They're completely neutral. It's at no cost to the parent. The district pays the bill for that. So if you feel like, hey, these evaluations don't seem right, I don't agree, I don't feel that they're accurate, you can ask for an independent evaluation. You can ask for an independent evaluation of all of them. If your child had 4 tests done, you might say, all 4 of these, I don't believe, I want them all redone, and we can do that. You might have 4 evaluations and only one of them makes you think, no, this one's not right. I'm telling you it's not right. And then you can ask just for that one to have an independent evaluation. That's up to you.
I have a question about, on the flip side, because most of the things you're talking about refers to students who are not quite at grade level.
Yes.
What about the students who are soaring above?
Ah,
Is that a part of special education? Because I'm finding that, I'm at Brim, and I'm finding that a lot of parents now have that concern.
Yes.
Their child should be above their placement.
so that is not included in the special education in New Jersey. That's not part of special education, but I will tell you, again, from personal experience, that you might have a child that you know is really, really smart, but is struggling in school. And so you might say to yourself, hey, my child should not be struggling the way he's struggling. You're going to get all these tests done, and they're going to tell you, well, no, he's average, he's fine. But in your heart of hearts, you know he's not average. He's well above average, and he needs extra help. This happened in my family with my niece. Those children are often called twice exceptional children, meaning that they're very, very smart, but they also have a learning disability. In an average child, your intelligence is here, your learning disability is here, and so it's clear that you're struggling and you're having difficulty. With the twice exceptional children, your IQ is here, which brings your learning here, which looks average. But our goal is to get your learning up to where your IQ is, no matter how high it is. Those children are more difficult. They need parents who really advocate for them because it's a struggle. It's a struggle when people are saying, no, she's getting B's and C's, she's fine. And you're saying, no, she needs to be in advanced classes. She needs to be in, the advanced math. She should be in accelerated English. But people say, no, she's getting a B, it's fine. That can be a struggle. And that might be an instance where you come to this meeting and they tell you, hey, your child, she's doing fine, whatever, it's no big deal. You might say, no, I want independent evaluations.
I just need to ask you that as you're speaking to the mic.
Oh.
So that the camera can pick it up. And then
Sorry.
whenever they have a question, we're going to have to ask you if you could walk to them because we only have one mic.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Okay, so now we've talked about the evaluations. We've talked about whether you agree with the evaluations or not, what would your next step be? So at that meeting called the eligibility meeting, the team will determine if your child falls into one of the 14 categories of special education. The categories are listed in the Parental Rights Handbook. You can read through it. If your child is eligible and falls into one of those categories, the team will develop an IEP for your child. That's an individual education program, and that is basically the child's roadmap to his education. So this gives the teacher the directions of what the child is struggling with, what supports he needs to improve, and how we're going to know that improvement has taken place. Parents should be involved in creating that IEP. If you turn up to a meeting and they just say, hey, your child is eligible, here's his IEP, sign it. That's not the way it's supposed to happen. They should have an IEP ready in a draft form. Go over it. You can ask questions. You can say, hey, in this part, you said he needs this service, but I feel like he might benefit more from a different service. And then those things can be changed before the IEP is finalized. Once the IEP is finalized, you once again have to give consent, and the consent is for us to start doing the things that are said in the IEP. So you can go to the IEP meeting, get a copy of the IEP and take it home with you and say, I'm going to think about this for a little while. If you don't give them written consent, it doesn't start until you're comfortable with that. Once you give consent, you have 15 days to continue to consider, and after 15 days, we implement the IEP. If at any point you disagree, there's always another avenue for you to take. There's always someone that you can go to say, hey, I disagree with this. You can escalate throughout the district, such as from the child study team, escalate to me, escalate to Jill Trainer, or escalate to the state level with mediation or due process. So what questions can I answer for you guys? Yes.
Going back to the beginning, under interventions, it says this can take 60 to 120 days. Is that for the entire process, or is that just for the individual plan? Let's say that you gave an example for is carving time out for the student individually. So I guess I'm trying to, the 60 to 120 days, what is that for?
The 60 to 120 days, you're right, is for the interventions specifically. One thing that happens sometimes is teachers have kids who are struggling. They decide, I'm going to help you an extra 3 days a week. They do that for 2 weeks and they say, well, it didn't work. We need to give that child time to be able to make process with those interventions so that they can progress throughout just in a gen ed class. So the 60 to 120 days is for the interventions specifically. What happens is if the teacher starts giving the interventions and the child is making progress, those interventions could go the rest of the school year. It's not after 120 days period, that's it, we're done. If he is making progress, she can keep doing those interventions. If though there isn't progress, that's when we can say, hey, we really tried this. We tried it for 2 months straight. There wasn't progress. I think there's something else going on with this child.
Okay. So I have one more question in regards to that. So let's say we are making progress and we're through the entire school year and we're back to square one with the following school year. Is it like almost required that the previous teacher hands off to the next teacher progress that needs to be made, or what successes and what areas of opportunity are still there? Is that typical? Do we see that happening?
Yeah, well, that is the ideal. So I feel your skepticism, and sometimes in between grade levels, there is a lack of communication. We have recently started a new system for our intervention and referral services team where everything is done online, so it's always kept. If your child, let's say your child starts to struggle in March, work is getting harder, he's having a difficult time, and so interventions are put in place. Those interventions should continue the next school year. It doesn't stop at the end of the school year. And even if your child goes to an enrichment program over the summer, you can let that enrichment program know, hey, my child gets these accommodations or these interventions, and they should continue with that through the summer as well. And also over the summer, if your child has an IEP and is going to the enrichment program, they can still get IEP services in that program over the summer. Things don't stop just because it's June 20th. Sure.
So the as far as the individual schools, can you explain like the particular schools that provide certain services? Because I think one of the questions or concerns of parents is like a school year may come up and then their child is changed from a school and they may not understand why their child is being changed into a different school. Can you explain, Donna, like those services?
Sure. So in Camden City School District, we do everything we can to provide what your child needs in our district so that he doesn't have to travel outside of the district to get services. So that means we have a lot of different types of classrooms available in district. It's not feasible to have every single type of classroom in every single school. So sometimes if your child needs a certain type of classroom, it might only be available at 1 or 2 schools, and he may need to move. If you're not comfortable with that, you always have the option to say, hey, I understand what he needs. How can he get that here? Because special education is a service, it's not a place. We're working really hard to make sure people don't say he needs to go to special ed. There's no place called special ed. Special education is an array of services that your child can get. Some of those services, it's easier to do it in a certain type of classroom, but that doesn't mean we can't do it in his current classroom. We have to figure out how we could make that work. So some of the classes that are available, starting with preschool, we have some preschool classes that are self-contained. That means they only have students with disabilities in that classroom. This type of classroom is really reserved for our preschoolers with the most needs. It's not that great for them developmentally because they're isolated from their peers, so they're not using their peers as role models. They are not usually in those classrooms, everybody struggles with communication, so they don't have a great friend who's willing to talk to them in the block area. They don't have the kid who always lines up correctly and they can copy him. I believe we only have 2 right now classrooms for preschoolers that are that's called self-contained, so that means it's only kids with disabilities. We have 1 classroom for preschool that's in-class resource, which means that room has some special needs kids and some general education kids, and it has 2 teachers, a special education teacher and a general education teacher. Those classrooms are at CREAM and at ECDC. Then throughout the district, we have in district schools and in private providers, we have resource classrooms for our kids where there are some special needs kids and some general education kids, and a specialized teacher travels to them however many times a week that is decided in their IEP to support their education. She reinforces what the teacher is teaching them, so they're with their general education peers all day, every day, in just a regular setting like all the other preschoolers. Yes?
I'm going to throw out there for the parents, if your child needs extra help, get a paraprofessional. That's a one-on-one help for your child.
So paraprofessionals are a good support for our kids. The paraprofessional, there has to be a specific reason for that paraprofessional Typically at the preschool level, it's due to behaviors. If your child has significant difficulty controlling his impulses because, he's 3 and that's difficult when you're 3 and you already have special needs. It can be difficult to control your impulses. Sometimes they have behaviors that the teacher cannot address on her own with the whole class. So the child might need additional assistance from a paraprofessional. Your child, if it's determined that your child needs a paraprofessional, they might need one specific person that works with them, or they might need one specific person that works with a small group of kids in the same room. So 2 or 3 kids might share a paraprofessional, or they might just need an extra person in the classroom in general, an extra classroom aide. So those are the 3 levels of paraprofessional that you can have. Every paraprofessional your child will have a behavior plan so that the paraprofessional knows exactly what she is working with your child, because her role is to support your child in learning to be able to be independent in the school. So he'll have a behavior plan that tells what the paraprofessional is supporting your child with, and also how will we know when your child no longer needs a paraprofessional? Because it sounds great in the school to have this extra person that's always there, but one day your child's going to graduate and that person's not going to be there anymore. And so your child throughout the years needs to learn those skills that he's missing so that when he graduates, he can be independent and he can live on his own and have a job and be able to do things without an extra person.
I have a question on that. What age or grade level is decided that the child should be dwindling off that paraprofessional?
That is dependent on the child. So every child has different needs, but as soon as they get the paraprofessional, that day is when we start thinking, what will this child look like when she no longer needs the paraprofessional? For some kids, they might get a para when they're in 2nd grade, and we might think to ourselves, you know what? She's got some behaviors that she really needs support with, but I'm confident that by this time next year, by the time she's finished with 3rd grade, she could be independent. She's going to get her act together. She's going to know the correct way to respond to overwhelming stimulus, and she's going to be okay. So some kids might have a paraprofessional for a year or 2 years. Some kids have severe needs and they need that paraprofessional. They might get that para in kindergarten. They might keep them till 8th, 9th grade. It is pretty common that once our kids get to high school, they do not want this old lady following them around because it is not cool. And so even our kids that have significant disabilities and struggles, they really advocate for themselves that they don't want that. And at that point, we have to take the child's needs into consideration too. Also, some of our paras are there for medical reasons. So some of our students might have medical issues that require them to have a separate person available for them at all times. That's not necessarily something that they're ever going to grow out of, whether they want it or not, because we have to keep our kids safe in school.
I know this isn't your area. Ms. Trainer said that we could get someone to come in to speak about the 504. Okay. But could you just give them a general idea what the 504 is, and then you can bring them back in through your meetings when we have the DPAC, and then we split out into the groups.
Sure. So we've been talking so far about IEPs, and you may have also heard a term called a 504. Has anybody heard that before? So a 504 is also in state law and federal law, and the 504 says that your child must have accommodations to be able to access his curriculum. So for instance, if your child's has a visual impairment and has difficulty seeing in a normal environment, your 504 might detail specialized lighting, specialized seating. It might detail that your child has to have a laptop or a tablet to do his work on because it can be enlarged. So all of those things can be done with a 504. A 504 is generally accommodations. It doesn't usually change the curriculum. It just makes them better able to access the curriculum. Any child could have a 504. If your child has ADHD, and you might think, well, what could a 504 do for that? Maybe your child doesn't have to, if the other kids are doing 20 problems, your child might need to do 12 because he can't pay attention for the full 20 problems. It might be that your child needs a standing desk. Maybe he can do his work okay, but he cannot stay in his seat. If he could have a standing desk and that would help him, he has the right to that. So a 504 generally is when your child needs accommodations, but it's not so severe that they need an IEP. If your child qualifies for an IEP, they can't have both. You can't have a 504 and an IEP. The IEP always takes precedence because it gives you more legal protection than a 504 does. A 504 gives your child reasonable accommodations that a school or a school district could reasonably put in place for your child. An IEP means you have to do it. So if your child has braces on his legs, he cannot walk up and down stairs, and you say, I'm going to get a 504 that says my child has to have an elevator in his school. If there are no schools with elevators, the district can't reasonably install an elevator. If your child has an IEP that says he needs an elevator, the district has to find a way to get your child in a school with an elevator, whether it's here in district or whether we have to send him to another location that has an elevator, we have to do it. So the 504 can give your child accommodations, help him access his curriculum, make him more successful in school. An IEP gives more intensive support, and it also has more legal protections. So back to the types of classrooms in district. Once your child, so we talked about preschool, once your child is finished with preschool, he is retested by the child study team. If he had an IEP, it's state law, they have to be tested again to go into kindergarten. And they are put into as preschoolers, they were a preschool child with a disability. In kindergarten, they're one of the other 13 classifications. So the types of classes we have in district are your child might be in a general education class and just some extra supports in his IEP just to help him get through the day, some modifications, some accommodations. That might be all he needs. He might be in an in-class resource class, which is some gen ed students, some special ed students, and 2 teachers. He might be in a general education class and be pulled out for certain parts of the day just to get some extra instruction. So maybe during the reading period, he might be pulled out for a half hour so that teacher can go over the instructions, make sure he understands it, make sure he knows what to do. He goes back to class and he can do the assignment. Some kids might be part of the day in in-class resource and part of the day in special education, or general education. If your child struggles with reading and has a disability in the area of reading, he or she might be in-class resource or self-contained for reading, but general education for math. If he can do the math, he can do the math. He doesn't need to leave his regular class for that. So those are the levels that we have. So general education, we have some pull-out, we have in-class resource, we have self-contained. If your child has significant disabilities that we cannot provide what he needs here in district, he might go to an out-of-district placement. So that's where we contract with another school or school district, and we transport your child there. A lot of parents feel like they want that. It's not really ideal in that it takes him out of his community. He doesn't have peers here. He doesn't have a connection to his community anymore, and that can be difficult. We do, for those kids, we do try really hard to get them back as much as we can. So we have an entire child study team devoted just to those kids who are in tuition placements. They work on bringing the kids back for prom, bringing them back for field trips. If your child is in first grade and his home school is going pumpkin picking, your child wants to go on that trip, he has that right to go on the trip. The final placement, which is the placement that we try to avoid at all costs, is home instruction, where your child just stays home all day long. A teacher comes for 2 hours to give him the content. He has no access to any kind of peers, general education or special education peers. And he is really disconnected from the curriculum. Typically, home instruction is due to a severe illness. So if your child is too ill to come to school, he may need home instruction. It's for a brief period. Home instruction can only last for 60 days at a time. At the end of 60 days, the child study team has to meet with you again to determine, hey, what's happening? Can he come back to school? Does he need a different placement? How can we get this child into an actual school? Because it's your child's right to be in a school like all the other kids. Yes.
So if the child is out of district, don't they still have the right to enjoy some of the extracurricular activities or things that are going on in the school district? So they still have the opportunity to be with their peers, even though they're out of district?
Yes. They do have that opportunity. Like I was saying, they can go to prom, they can walk in graduation. So if the child would have attended Camden High, but he's at Bankbridge, if he expresses an interest, I want to graduate at Camden High, he can do that. We have had one of our learning consultants, Kelly Garlitz, is phenomenal at making sure her kids in tuition placements get all the opportunities that the in-district kids get. So she arranges for them to try out for sports teams. She had one particular student who was on the Camden High basketball team. So we had to arrange transportation for every practice and game to go pick up this child and bring her back to district. One thing to consider, though, is the tuition students who come back for those activities are still subject to all the code of conduct that our in-district students are. So some of them have severe difficulty controlling their behavior. We can't bring them back and have them not be able to behave in a way that's safe for all the other kids. But that being said, if they have behavior that can be helped with a paraprofessional, we can arrange for them to have a paraprofessional during those events. We had a student who wanted to be in Girl Scouts, but she needed her school, I believe, was H.B. Wilson, and the Girl Scout troop was at a different school. So we arranged for her to be transported so that she could participate in Girl Scouts. Her paraprofessional went with her so that she could do what all the other kids in her home school were doing. And that was a great way for her to form relationships with the other kids in her neighborhood school.
Going back to home instructions, I found out that 2 hours is not enough for a child to get any kind of instructions. It's just not enough to put everything in the curriculum in that little head. Okay, personally, that happened to my child. He could not be in school. He was getting severe sick, being that he had PSD. So therefore, I worked with the school to get a schedule where he could manage to be in school, get half a day, and then I'll pick him up and take him home. The school was able to work where they put the scheduled classes first, and all the extra, like art and all that stuff, was taken off the schedule so he can get the school, the subjects cover. So that's something that the parents can do too. This happened to me personally with my child, so that's why I'm speaking on it.
Yes, you're right. So in the special education department, our main goal is to have your child in school, in a public school with all of his peers, with all of his friends, like everyone else. And we will go to extreme lengths to make that happen, if it can happen. So that was an example of a child that we put on a half-day schedule. We have a child right now who comes to school for 1 hour, because we want him to have that experience and that exposure. He's not able to stay the full day. He can't tolerate that, but we can start with 1 hour. So he comes in first thing in the morning. He gets to have breakfast with his peers. He gets to do morning circle with his peers, just like everyone else. And then when he's feeling overwhelmed, he can go. After the first marking period, we're going to increase him to 2 hours so that we can slowly increase this child so that he can eventually be in school all day, just like all the other kids. So if you have a child that needs special accommodations like that, absolutely speak up during your child study team meetings, because we're happy to try to do whatever we can to get your child in a school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moss. So again, for parents and knowing that the services are here in the district, it's just a matter of one is the referral process, and then the other is parents requesting services. As we move forward in the school year, we will have more programs as far as, excuse me, in reference to what kind of programs specifically that the district have. We're going to be talking about transitional services, because that's important for children who are going into high school, so they can plan during that high school time frame as far as what career and direction that students are going after the fact. So there's a whole host of services and programs that the district provides. It's overwhelming to try to produce all that in one meeting. So we just wanted to start off with the process. So then that way also, as we move forward with our monthly meeting, we will have specific topics on programs or any other suggestions that parents or FOCs may want. We will bring that to the table. So again, thank everyone for coming. Thank you for the technical support from Joyce Marshall and Sheena. And then we have also, before we leave, we have Miss Michelle Taylor from SPAN. She's worked with us last year to come and bring other additional services and programs, to our particular special needs meeting. So she will be assisting us. And then, do you want to talk about the the particular flyers that you have handed out real quick? You didn't have some?
Bien rápido. I have some paperwork. We have parent conference coming up. Right here is the paperwork. These are notes for you to study, the parents to study, questions that you can ask, be prepared for that parents conference and ask the questions. There's several questions in there, which is important to be prepared so you know what to ask, so you don't get lost in the process of sitting there and getting nervous. I get nervous in front of my kids' teachers. That's something. So she's going to be giving out, or I'm going to be giving it out, and I'll leave you with that.
Okay.
I know you say
Thank
quick.
you.
I'm trying to
Yes, thank you. So again, thank everyone for coming. And our next meeting is December 12th. And at that meeting, we will have someone from the ELL department come out and do a presentation on what should be happening through that particular program. So again, thank everyone for coming, and see you guys next month.